Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's Steve with Real Progressives. I wanted to go live today while my son is taking a nap. Had to work from home today. Actually, I took the day off, didn't even work from home. The flu bug is rampant in our household. It's taking us down one by one. But I wanted to hit a point out to you all that I think is very important. And this is why we focus so very, very much on the economic perspective as it pertains to all the varying knowledge areas that progressives tend to gather around and solidify around. And the reason is this: economics, no matter where you come from, directly impacts you. It directly impacts you. And it's one of the most tangible, understandable aspects of life for everyone, whether you're black, brown, white, whether you are gay, straight, cis white male, or gay, it doesn't matter. Whether you're an immigrant, whether you are a citizen, whether you are here on a green card, it doesn't matter. Economics affects every one of us. And so you start to think to yourself, well, if that affects every one of us, wouldn't that one area that touches all of us be a pretty important spot to focus your efforts on? I think it's pretty obvious that it is. But there are many who don't see that. So one of the things that we were talking about is we started recruiting new people to Real Progressives, and we started looking for additional activists and quite frankly, knowledge brokers from academia that could fill roles. Was the varying socioeconomic perspectives of individuals and how economics directly impacts them. And you start looking around and you realize that there are many people out there who come from a position of privilege, that have families that have done well by themselves, that brought that wealth to their children. The children didn't have to experience the pain and suffering that comes from not having access to some of the benefits that many do enjoy. And then you look at people who have had and lost and who have been devastated by the highs and lows of the economy. And then you look at the people who have never had and have no prayer of having. And you start to realize that while each one of us has a different vantage point, the economy nonetheless is directly related to each one of our lives. So I was thinking to myself, many of the people at Real Progressives, many of the activists, many of the volunteers are people who have had tremendous calamities brought to their life. Many of them have been destitute, have been rocked by very, very disgusting neoliberal policy agendas. And the absolute decimation that occurs from when you cut spending. And the changing of how we see societal benefits and how we have eliminated the public space. Most people that are on the bottom of the food chain are so deeply polarized by needing benefits and also deeply hurt and crushed by cuts to those benefits. However, when you look at the middle class and you look at folks that are used to having a better than poverty-driven life, those individuals 9 times out of 10 are only a paycheck away from being on the other side of that dilemma, being out in the streets freezing themselves. Most average American citizens have less than $500 in the bank. Most of them are even below water. And then you have the privileged few that either by hook or by crook took care of things and just the sun shined on them and life was good to them, but they're still only an inch away from the pig slop. And then you have the super wealthy who have, sometimes by ill gain, sometimes by sheer force of will, have found a way to overcome and rise economically. But nonetheless, every one of us is tied to the government spending. Government is how money gets into the economy, or you're dealing with bank credit. So naturally, when you start asking yourself, how do we serve the needs of the 99%? It really does come back to understanding how money is created and how money is generated for the economy, because money is what grants us access to real resources. When you cut spending, you cut access to real resources. When you cut spending on the bottom and you allow GDP to rise to the top because of sales and other business profits, the poor end up having to find money somewhere else. And where do people find money if the government hasn't spent it? They find it in taking out loans. They find it in going to private banks. And they find it in paying interest on that money. This is why such a prevalence of bank credit is running rampant throughout our economy, and why so many are literally slaves to the private debt they've had to incur just to survive. This is a direct result of government austerity. So when the great financial crisis hit in the 2007-2008 timeframe, we were losing hundreds of thousands of jobs a month. People were literally jumping out of windows, going behind a tree and killing themselves. People were hanging themselves. People were divorcing. Houses were being repossessed. People were literally getting run over by an economy that was allowed to run rampant by the banks, by Wall Street, by private interests. And even the wealthy took a bath during the great financial crisis. It was a great bubble that burst and destroyed millions and millions of people's lives. As someone who was destroyed during the great financial crisis, I have a particular energy and a particular anger at rectifying the situations that led to people doing such things. Regulating the banking industry, regulating the savings and loan industry, regulating the way that shadow banking operates, you name it. I also have an incredible drive to debunking the myths and legends that cause people to want to raise taxes to pay for life-saving programs, because this is what literally causes those programs not to happen and causes government spending to not happen, and then causes these situations that drive us to private credit. Why is private credit so bad? Aside from the ball and chain it puts on your leg, private credit also seeks out credit-worthy borrowers. And when you look at what credit-worthy looks like, there's large swaths of the population that are cut out of the ability to get private credit. In some ways, it's probably a good thing, right? But most ways, it's not. Most times, people have no option but to go for destitution or commit horrible choices to survive. That should elicit incredible amounts of rage in any progressive, any human being that understands how money is created and understands it's the federal government's job to spend money into existence to keep the economy going so that people are not forced into private debt, would be incredibly angry. But here's another problem. There are many new progressives coming out of the woodworks. They're getting filled with garbage from tales, myths, and legends from well-meaning lefties that have bought into the idea it's the banksters, when they don't realize that the reason why the banks have run rampant is because of a dereliction of duty from Congress. They don't understand the roots of neoliberalism. They don't understand how this all came to be, and they just look at the situational aspects of the banks running amok right now. They don't realize that a large part of this started from the Chicago School and Milton Friedman, who created this fear of inflation that took away public spending, which we used to know in spades, which was what made America ever great, which was what boomed us through the actual World War II boom. And it fueled the rise of NASA and other great things about America, the things that were good. We have eliminated that, and we have pushed everyone to fatten Wall Street. This right here should make all of us angry. But sadly, these newly awakened progressives are very sensitive people. They can't stand to think that something they once stood for, raising taxes, fighting to hike taxes to pay for things, they believe that that is sacred land. And when you bring up the fact that taxes don't fund spending, they get extremely angry because you're violating their hard-earned belief that taxes do fund spending. And because of that, places like Puerto Rico end up not getting the help they need because we are living under the myth that we can't afford to help Puerto Rico. Or we're living under the belief that we can't afford to completely gut Flint, Michigan and fix the pipes and get them clean water yesterday. Because of that, these new progressives who are not evolved in their political thinking yet, that are just waking up to the realities, they're showing up to these marches, they're showing up and they're doing these various activities, they're dem-entering, they're doing this, they're doing that. They don't really have a deep well of understanding of economics, and they don't necessarily see the relevance of it. And so they get really angry when you present this in a very forceful way. But remember, those of us who suffered from the great financial crisis, those of us who suffered as a result of neoliberalism, are fighting for our existence. So telling us to tone down because it hurts your feels because you believe that taxes fund spending. But the people that are aware, who know that they don't, are angry because they want to change the world and they want to fix the suffering. So you've got two angles. You've got the neophytes, and then you've got the old dogs who have been used to fighting this old tax war since Methuselah was alive. And they don't want to let go of their hard-earned Hatfield and McCoy fight with the Republicans. They love that fight. It's their favorite fight, and they don't want it to go away. So by not respecting their fight, they get very angry and they tune you out as well. But the reality is that the people that are suffering, the people that are dying, have a right to be angry. The people that have been enlightened have a right to be angry. And just like any other activist for any other area of the progressive movement, people that understand economics have a right to be angry. They have a right to be bitter. Once the veil is lifted and you realize the lies, you have a right to be angry. You have a right to be heard. You have a right to speak truth to power. And you have a right to chastise those that would take their hard-earned myths and legends. And you have a right to tell them that their myths and legends are killing people. You have a right to do that. Now, unfortunately, because people are very sensitive, very stubborn, somewhat haughty and arrogant, they can't stand the idea that they're wrong. So it's very disturbing when you don't realize that people that have been directly affected by government austerity and reducing deficits and trying to save, money here and there and fiscal responsibility, they don't realize the people that have been deeply wounded, lost families, lost children, lost family members, lost homes, lost jobs, weren't able to get health care, weren't able to take care of things that are very important in their lives. When you realize, you need to understand their anger too. And you can't get all hurt and feelsy because they yelled about something or they said, hey, God damn it, this is not the right way. They have a right to be angry. They are hurting. And this is why economics matters. Because again, it doesn't matter if you're white, black, brown, gay, straight, you name it, immigrant, non-immigrant, whatever. Economics impacts all of our lives. And then when you look at the dreamers and you look at the xenophobes and you look at the people that are against immigration and that hate the people that got into this country through ways other than the quote unquote legal way, you begin to realize that economics is at play. Because if we had a federal job guarantee in this country, it would not matter one iota if we brought immigrants into this nation. They would not be seen in any way, shape, or form as the way they are today. We would have things in place to make sure everyone had access to a job. And if we stopped focusing on trying to bring manufacturing back and started worrying about bringing infrastructure into the 21st century, and we started worrying about investing in green energy, and we started worrying about giving everyone health care as a right, and we started worrying about giving everyone education as a right, and we started worrying about expanding Social Security, all of a sudden you'd realize there would be millions and millions and millions of jobs just to meet demand. People would have more money in their wallet to be able to actually spend at their local grocer. People would be able to lead a life more abundant, and we could begin talking about reducing the work week from 40 to maybe 30 hours a week. Then we could start talking about things in a very different way. So yes, to expect people that have been harmed by economic illiteracy to just be silent and gentle, somehow or another better than every other activist out there. The economic activists have to be just a little bit nicer, a little bit sweeter, a little bit more gentle in defending the dying. I find that to be incredibly disturbing. I find it to be incredibly disturbing because we are picking and choosing which victims are allowed to be angry, which victims are allowed to speak out in their own defense, which victims qualify as worthy of outrage. And I'm here to tell you, my friends, the 99% includes people that make more than minimum wage. It includes people, many of which are CEOs even, because we're not talking about the richest 1/1/10%. We're talking about the 99%, folks. And when you look at that, you realize the unifying underlying message that transcends race, that transcends gender, that transcends nation of origin, transcends age, transcends learning abilities, transcends any other issue you name, including the environment, is economics. This is why it is so important. And this is why we must cease tone policing. This is why we must cease with the tone policing. You know, I remember back when the Black Lives Matter activists grabbed the microphone out of the hands of Bernie Sanders. Many of Bernie Sanders' supporters got up in arms. How dare she grab the microphone from Bernie Sanders? I support activism, friends. I support direct action, and I support being properly outraged. Now, I'm going to say something that will seem somewhat outrageous, but we have got a very, very large focus that is coming from the progressive movement on police violence, on the absolute need to focus on Black Lives Matter. But let me ask you this. How many people in the United States and quite frankly around the world have died as a direct result of government austerity, meaning cutting and reducing the deficit, cutting spending, fiscal responsibility, and all that happy horse shit? It's in the hundreds of thousands of people. It is more than the wars have killed. People die when governments reduce spending. Is it a form of population control? Is it a form of just screwing over the poor? What is it? Folks, there's a million answers to it. But from our perspective as the 99%, if we were economically literate and we could unite around a common understanding of how money is created by government spending, and that private banks fill the void. When government stops spending, banks fill it up with spending. That's how the economy stays afloat. You want to see banks get out of the human wrecking business? Start the government spending again, and all of a sudden it'll swing the other way. So it's not the banksters and all the other stuff, although they're trash and they should be buried in the sea somewhere, right? It really comes down to Congress. And Congress marches to your beat. And if you are unwilling to fight for economic truth through modern monetary theory, and you're unwilling to speak in terms that cut right through the bullshit, and you get angry at activists who are angry over losing family and loved ones and are suffering mightily because of it, if you get angry at them, you can pretty much slam dunk guarantee there will be no progressive agenda no matter how much you want it. That's just the fact, Jack. Just the fact, Jack. So it is extremely important that you start asking yourself, hey, we don't need identity politics weaponized. We need intersectionality. What could be more intersectional than understanding the rudiments of the macroeconomy? Every single group of people in America and around the world are directly affected by macroeconomics. Microeconomics is what we get screwed up with because we start thinking about what we're going to do with the money once we get it. But at the macro level, which is how money is spent into the economy, the government spends it into existence and it taxes it out of existence. When you look at your state governments and they're all of a sudden having a budget shortfall, you can pretty much point to reductions in federal spending as the cause. You look at states who have blowing up pensions, and we talk about their unsustainable bullshit. The federal government right now could swoop in and fix every one of them and make every commitment that was made stay firm. And new generations coming out wouldn't be pushed to 401k plans and other bullshit. They could have a solid pension too. But we have forsaken all reality, and we have ignored the truth of the past, and we have refused to learn the basics of modern monetary theory. And therefore, as you listen to Bernie Sanders the other night talking about Medicare, Bernie Sanders is busy out there saying we got to find money, raise money to pay for stuff. You may love Bernie. I love Bernie. Guess what? Bernie is wrong. Why is Bernie wrong? Because he's catering to a group of people that don't understand economics. And he's trying to get something passed because our friends within the movement do not understand that federal taxes do not fund federal spending. So this is the balanced budget garbage that we don't need. This is the reduce the deficit shit we don't need. This is the burgeoning national debt that we don't need to worry about. It's bullshit. It's just a bunch of savings accounts with already in existence US dollars. So when you see people outraged, when you see people angry, when you see people relentlessly pushing for economic truth, you should understand exactly why they are doing it and exactly why they're angry. And you should understand that if you don't understand, that it's not their job to make you understand. It's your job to pick up a book, crack the spine, and do some reading. People are angry and they're fighting round the clock to try to expose people to this information. They give links, they give videos, they give books, they give speeches, they give live streams. They do all sorts of stuff to try and open the eyes of an unknowing audience. And the pushback, the snark, the sick laughter, ha ha ha, you don't know anything about economics. And we're supposed to be sweet and kind to them when they say stupid things like that. We're supposed to be sweet and kind because we know we're enlightened. We've been whatever, initiated. But they're allowed to sit there and do that. Folks, imagine any other group, any other activist group, and having someone, whether it be about race, whether it be about gender, whatever, whether it be about the environment, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, imagine somebody out there going, ha, 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 you and your stupid racial stuff, ha, 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 you and your stupid gender stuff, ha, 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 you and your stupid handy-capable stuff, ha, ha, ha. And here we are talking about economics, which literally saves millions of lives. And people laugh, ha, 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 you and your stupid cult, you and your stupid economics, you and your stupid this, that, and the other. And we're supposed to treat them sweetly, gently, lovingly, kindly. Folks, the struggle is real. And this is why the stupid wall, we told you long ago, Trump was never going to have Mexico pay for the wall. There was no, and there's going to be tons of people that are dead. There'll be a bloodbath of drones patrolling that wall. And tons of people will be killed. There's all sorts of stuff that comes back to an economic motive. The reason why they don't want the immigrants here is because they think the immigrants are going to take the jobs. We don't have enough money to pay for all these people. We got to get rid of them. There's not enough to sustain them all. We got to get rid of them. Hell, we had a post earlier today about immigration where people were saying, we got to deport all these people because we can't afford them all. Economics is the core of every single thing you care about. To ignore it is to tell me you don't really care about the issue you claim to care about, because you can't get there without answering the question, how are you going to pay for it? I am Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives. Have a good night.